The way I feel is that I've been making records for quite some time. And the one thing that's happened in the last maybe 15 years is I've had the opportunity to make records with different people. I've been invited as a collaborator, as an arranger, as a co-writer. And I really do enjoy that process so much more so than the actual idea of originating the work entirely yourself. And that's possibly because you put pressure on yourself, and you set a bar, and you imagine an audience, or maybe an invisible, or a small audience, albeit, judging everything you do. And it's a really silly way to actually, it's a stupid pressure that you put on upon yourself, and it's a silly way to reflect on yourself and on what you do. And when you do that with other people, with other collaborators, you don't think about that at all. And in fact, you do exactly the same thing. You contribute, you reach inside yourself, you respond to your internal instinct, and you contribute. You do exactly the same thing. And you do it without any pressure, any tension. And it's a really enjoyable process. So I kind of try to take that pressure off myself, and I will not commit to another artistic record after this, but I will commit to lots of collaborations. And some of those collaborations may actually be such that I'm the greater part of the collaboration, and it is almost like an artistic record. But, I'm 64. I'm not 54. I'm 64. I was making records in 1983 when I didn't even know what I was making records when the before postmodernism and irony had crept into the whole process, when it was closer to it was closer to the sort of the joy of hearing Little Stevie Wonder than it was to this idea of what's the next clever move, so to speak. And that's a long time. And yeah, I think I feel that I know it sounds crazy. I don't think I need to make any more records, but I want to make music.
Have you felt that before?
Yeah.
Or does it always feel like there needs to be another thing?
I felt that quite recently. I making Radom Calls. I don't know if you heard Radom Calls, which was the solo record I made in 2019. That was really I love doing that, and I love doing that because I said, right, I'm going to walk away from the name. I'm going to make a record very much on my own. I had I had the foresight and joy to actually call Cathal Coughlan and say, do you want to come on the record and sing with me? And thank God I did, because I don't know if you know, but he died a few years later. So that was incredible. And the little moves I made on Radom Calls were basically pushed me into the direction to make Hey Panda. And at the time, it was before I'd met Ben Garrett from Friars, who I really, this guy is, he's 34, 35, maybe when I started working with him, he was 30. And he was he was a gift of a young fella to hook up with, because he basically brought me into a world that I've admired but never thought I could participate in. And he basically brought me in and showed me just some of the the ways and the and the handles that one needed to access to make a different kind of music. And thankfully, I was able to make this record because of that.
When I asked you if you had experienced it before, you were really referring to the last few records, but have there been other points in your very long career in which it's felt like there might not necessarily be another album?
Sure. I mean, before I started High Llamas and Microdisney finished, so I was very much the junior partner there. There was two of us, Carl Cochran and myself, and Carl, and we both wrote music. Carl was the lyricist, and he was a very he was almost like a literary character, you know. And I was this guy who is, you know, regarded as the music guy. In fact, Carl was very much as much the music guy as I was. You know, when that ends and you have to actually you literally use your own artistic voice and literally your own voice, that's hard. And there's so many bands that you could point to and just say, oh yeah, that was the time when that fella stepped out, you know. You know, this, you know, obscure artists. I'm thinking of, like, you know, you could go back to the Move, for instance, and, you know, Roy Wood and Jeff Lynne, they both stepped out, you know, and found their thing. And I suppose the big one would be, I guess, in recent years would be Nirvana and David Grohl, wouldn't it? And you know, but that is a moment. That certainly is a moment, and it's a moment when you can just think, you know, this isn't me. But then that changed, and the thing with the High Llamas that really changed from the very beginning was really me hooking up with Tim Gain from Stereolab. And I'm not talking about the sound here. I'm just talking about the attitude, the person that you are, and how you actually go into a studio. And I'd been through the 80s where music making had been very, very professionalism and produced. And Tim, even though he had his time in the 80s with McCarthy, when he created Stereolab, he created it as a I mean, it was a band, but it was definitely an art project as well. And he had some basic ground rules that were very, very smart and very useful. And he sort of taught me how to kind of relax and loosen up, and absolutely don't walk in to the studio with all your experience, your production experience. Leave some of it outside and be prepared to sort of loosen up and learn. So that's how and why the High Llamas changed, you know, from the very first record, which was Santa Barbara, to Gideon Gay. That's why that change happened.
Was the High Llamas an art project in some sense to you as well?
I would say probably not, mainly because of the person I am. I'm a worker, and I say that as somebody who's struggled at school. I left school very early because I didn't realise it at the time, but I had mental health problems and I was dyslexic. I really struggled, and I didn't understand what was going on at school because I had ideas and I was creative, but I couldn't put it down on paper. And I was a massive academic failure. So I just ran away from that, and I worked in construction sites and car factories. And so to actually, you know, find yourself as a person in music, that was enough. The idea of that being artistic didn't even occur to me. It was like that was as foreign to me as an avocado was when I first saw an avocado at the age of 22, I said, "What the hell is this?" And this is avocado. It tastes really great. So no, I wouldn't have called it an art project. I would have called it, making another band. And God, I'm lucky to be able to do this, because it's better than putting my hand in freezing cold water at 6 o'clock in the morning.
There's not a ton of value in dwelling on these sorts of things, but if you had come along 10, 20 years later and the education was more in tune to such things,
yeah,
and teachers were paying closer attention, whether your experience would have been dramatically different.
Would I have become a musician? Possibly, yeah.
Eventually, but even just academically, you're obviously an intelligent person.
It would have been very different, and I would have probably gone on to study at, I go to college, go to university. I would have probably discovered something that I really enjoyed. It might have been history, or it might have been architecture, because I love architecture. And yeah, I may never have made music, because I was compelled to make music because it was the only thing I could do.
When did that switch flick for you? When was it clear that it was something that you could do?
Well, you've heard this from so many people of my generation, but punk rock was very, very important. I don't mean musically. It wasn't that important musically, I don't think, but culturally, it was hugely important. Empowerment, totally, yeah. And we're talking about, 1977, 78, 79, that I could literally feel the change, where in 1976 or 77, kids were listening to, some smart kids were listening to, Neil Young or Steely Dan records, and the really smart guys were listening to jazz records. And then you had this other bunch over here who were listening to folk, Planksty and Richard Thompson, whatever. But the whole thing was, everybody was insecure, because it was all about ability and technique. And punk literally just allowed you to go into a room and not be judged. And that's what happened. And it happened for me, like 79, 1980s, 79, that's when it started. And by that time, things had moved on from the what I call the rock and roll part of punk. There was the rock and roll, whether it's the Ramones or the Pistols, and then there was the art school, which was like in the US that would have been, David Byrne, Talking Heads, and in the UK it would have been Gang of Four and the Mekons, and Scritti Politti.
Yeah, what we would call post-punk now.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And it was that moment where I just thought, wow, this is something that I want to be part of. And you go out and you literally find your people. You literally find them, and you literally find them on the street, and you make very quick decisions, and you're in rooms making music very quickly. There's no big project planning. It's very, very instant. That's the change.
I like the way you phrase it in terms of finding your people. And it strikes me that in a lot of ways for kids growing up now, it subculturally may be a little bit easier, with the internet, to find out that there are other people who like the same things that you do. And, I guess in some way, think the same way that you do as well. And I wonder if at any point prior to that, whether things really did feel hopeless before you found that group.
Oh yeah, I felt very hopeless, and and there was a kind of music was very important. Music was huge. Music was wonderful. But we were mere observers, and we were shy kids. Our confidence was shot, and there was an awful lot in the music business at that time. Whether it was like Rod Stewart sort of kind of flaunting around London, or David Geffen getting his, creating his vision of LA music. It was these confident people, wasn't it? It was these, and the rest, and the rest of us out there, we were these. We were very much the observers. We were very much the audience, and I don't remember that as being like good times at all. I do not. I remember it.
Probably was for Rod Stewart and David Geffen.
It was fantastic for those guys. They loved it. They loved it. We were fed. We had jobs, and we could get the bus, and we could, and Saturday night was Saturday night. But I don't remember it being like this fantastic time. And the one thing, and this coincided with me going back to Ireland, because I was in the UK living in a car town, and then my parents brought me back to Ireland, and I was in Cork City, which is a very provincial, small city in the south of Ireland, and it was incredible because there was two things. There was this, the punk had reached Cork in this very strange way, and but the participants were these poets. They were just amazing. They were just fantastic people, and but also, Ireland was, it was disassociated with the 20th century in the most fantastic way. So I was blessed, and that's when life really started for me. Just those early years in Cork, making music and just breathing that air.
Where does Thin Lizzy and Phil Lynott fit in all of this? There seems to be a lot of ways in which he was a great songwriter, a very lyrical songwriter, and there are ways in which he was kind of carrying that Irish literary tradition.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy. I mean, imagine being a very tall, mixed race guy in Ireland with an afro and a massive attitude. Incredible, really. The interesting thing about Thin Lizzy was because they were reasonably well known in Ireland when they had these early singles, and they were basically a power trio. And they weren't, Whiskey in the Jar and all that. That was fine. They were just a novelty. But then when they made they made those records, which were pop rock records and very, very successful, and they really they brought people together. I mean, in the UK, I remember being in the UK and seeing them at a show in Hammersmith, and the UK audience loved these people. And remember, we're talking about a time when Irish people in the UK were like not popular because of politics, And where did he fit in? Very interesting. He's a really interesting guy. I saw a picture of him the other day, and he had a T-shirt, and it said "More blacks, more dogs, more Irish." And that's a direct reference to if you were Irish in the 60s and you went looking for a job or you went looking for a place to live, there would be a sign saying no dogs, no Irish, and no blacks.
Need not apply.
Yeah. More Irish, more dogs. I thought that was funny.
Were there any positives as far as the construction experience went? Yeah,
I didn't think about them. Now, then I didn't say, oh, I'm in the middle of these positives that I'm going to take away for the rest of my life. No, I was terrified. Imagine being 15 on a building site, and you literally had two gangs. You had the Irish gangs and you had the British gangs, and the British gangs were and they were run by the gangers, and the ganger basically, ran this group, and the Irish guy ran this group. And I'm not talking about mafioso. They were literally these guys. That would be a concreting gang, and this would be a concreting gang. And I was basically looked after by a guy called Martin Kelly from Tipperary, the Irish gang, and he was a very smart guy. He said to me, I had very ginger hair. He said to me, "Ginger, you don't belong here." Tipperary accent was more like "Ginger, you don't belong here," and he realised that I shouldn't have been there. I mean, they were pretty savage places. 1970s construction sites, they were pretty savage.
Timeline wise, so you mentioned 1979 being when a lot of the stuff started clicking for you, and I think Microdisney officially being founded in 1980. So it sounds like things, once you knew where you wanted to be, things started coming together pretty quickly.
That's right. They did. We Carl and I, it was like there was no opposition. There were a couple of bands in Cork, and they were like, R&B bands, basically. They were rhythm and blues bands, and
like pub rock, maybe?
Yeah, pub rock, yeah. And there was a lot of folk music, and there were some incredible folk artists, just, incredible people. And Dublin was full of, there was a lot going on in Dublin, a lot going on in Belfast. And U2 were just beginning to sort of happen as a band. But as I said, we didn't have any competition. We were like there was one other band called Five Go Down to Sea, who were just incredible, who were like Beefheart. And but we got onto every bill because we were organised and we sorted it and we wrote quickly. And Carl was magnificent literary front man. We got onto every bill. We played with everybody. Anybody who came to Ireland, we played with them. Susie and the Banshees, The Fall, U2 many times, Dexys, anybody who came, Depeche Mode. We were the band. We opened. So that was very, very, very quick. And it was, in those days, it was mad, very fast, punky, funky music. It didn't last for very long. And after about 2 years, we basically said, right, everything has to change. And we just completely trashed everything and just changed and became this kind of strange melodic duo.
What happened ultimately with the band?
With Microdisney, at the end of 1989. We ran the course. We made 2 or 3 records with Virgin. We made one record with Rough Trade. That's a
great run for a decade.
Yeah. We just kept making records. Made the record with Rough Trade, which got Virgin wanting to sign us, and we didn't stay with Rough Trade basically because we couldn't afford to, because didn't have any money, and so but we had very good people at Virgin, and we made a record with Lenny Kaye, which was an amazing thing to do, and then we made the last album, and we just realised that we, as people, we had run the course for that moment, and we were about to start to make a record with Don Was. That would have been amazing, but
for younger people, can't really overstate what a big deal that would have been at the time.
That would have been incredible. And we just realised that we'd grown up together. Carl and I had grown up together, and we realised artistically we didn't have anything to share, and if we couldn't share it, it wasn't worth doing it. And so we both decided to just stop it at that point.
You alluded a little bit to some of the, I think the way you put it was mental health problems that really impeded your academic career. And you know, to a certain extent addressed kind of indirectly through, you know, this creative process and really figuring out what you wanted to do with your life. But actually, in terms of addressing them head on, was that something that had to come later?
Yeah, I didn't have a clue what was going on, but I had this crippling OCD, which basically
I was diagnosed with OCD during the pandemic, actually. So.
There you go. And did things make sense to you after that? Once you got that,
It's so funny. I don't believe in astrology at all. More power to people who do. I've no issue at all with it. But I compare it to sitting down and reading the most accurate horoscope of your entire life, where suddenly everything starts to make sense because you have this diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, then you might have an insight. I think OCD afflicts most people to some extent, and most people have, I guess, superstitions. But when OCD literally prevents you from leaving the house, or sends you on a terrifying binge, so to speak, just to close down really, really weird thoughts, then it's very dangerous.
It's an interesting point and something that I didn't realize until I went through. Like a lot of people, I was very hesitant to deal with a lot of these things, and the pandemic really sort of, didn't give me a lot of choice. It pushed me over the edge. But something that was surprising to me in terms of psychiatry and diagnoses is that, at least with OCD, the way that they determine the severity is how much it impacts your ability to lead a normal life.
Yeah. That you get the sheets and you tick the boxes, and then and you answer the questions, more than one day, more than 2 days, more than 1 hour a day, more than whatever. And it's and I realized that's what was happening to me at school. So I went into exams, and the anxiety of an exam would crank the OCD. It would just punch you, and it would just shut you down. And you just basically stared at a page, and just walked out, leaving an empty page out of an example. It's mad stuff.
Obviously, it manifests itself in different ways, both for different people, but also, within the same people. I find myself, that it manifests itself in all sorts of different ways. And there's a lot of what I've done and continue to do that I would chalk up to perfectionism as being one of the things that hampers my ability to actually to finish something. And that very much is OCD. And it's something that, in art specifically, it's something that, can make some really great stuff, but can also completely shut the process down.
Yeah, and if it shuts down a part of your life, namely that part, the social part of your life, or the life where you are, a collaborative member, a human being, then it's not your friend.
I wonder if that's something that collaboration gave you early on, right? It's a double-edged sword in terms of having this and collaborating with somebody, in that, difficult from the standpoint that sometimes you have this very specific vision and you want things to be that way, and it can be difficult to compromise, but at the same time, that person is there to really to shake you out of.
Yeah, without a doubt. I would say that with regards to sort of mental health, certainly, I loved being in the room with other people, and I loved the process of collaboration because it was a refuge. It was absolutely a refuge. And yeah, I mean, collaboration is it's a strange one because a lot of people who may have worked with me would say you are not a collaborator. Yeah, they've said worse things than that. He said, "I can't. You do not collaborate." Yeah.
That's a very nice way of saying other things.
Yeah. But God, I love it when I do have those people with me because it's a refuge. But actually, in my older years, I can work as a solitary maker now, basically because I think I'm better and I'm through that horribleness, and and I can actually absolutely double down and kind of I wouldn't say try to look for a perfectionism. I would say get into allow oneself to go down the rabbit hole for a little bit and just realize that, wow, there's something extraordinary could be made here. Jack Knifley told me that if you're working on an idea and you're 10 minutes into that idea and you haven't committed it, then you should junk the idea. You should move away from it. He's just got this lovely idea that within that 10 minutes, the excitement, it's like the golden moment. It's when it's glowing. And if you can actually get it down, commit it to tape while it's in that moment, you've got something very, very special. And obviously, there's an extreme there. But I think to a certain extent, like maybe if you're working on a bass sound or a bass riff or something like that, and you think you have it, I think he's like he's put it down in its imperfection. You can go back to it and just clean it up, but put it down while it's imperfect, and then move on and then go back to it.
There's a lot of very underrated value in leaving something and coming back to it with fresh eyes as well, which this affords you.
Absolutely. I mean, Panda was those ideas were in a dormant state for a while, and I kind of went back to it with very, very fresh ideas and very fresh eyes, and a little bit like you alluded to this idea that your commitment to perfection prevented you from finishing work, and I understand that, and I think I was able to put the distance between those ideas, and when I came back, I listened to those ideas, and it's weird. You listen to you could listen to them as a fan and say, oh, this is great. What the hell? This is great. I mean, there isn't much to do here. You don't have to do that much here, It's nearly done. Whereas in the previous iteration of your relationship with that music, you were just you were just being sucked into the negativity of I cannot achieve the perfection. Go away and come back as a fan and then see how you feel about it.
When you say Panda, do you mean the song or the entire album?
Oh, the entire album, the entire record.
What were some of those ideas?
Fall Off the Mountain was that whole B section where it switches up into this kind of cod, Kool and the Gang. It starts off with this sort of very, very electro rurality, I'd call it, and then it switches up to this silly cabaret dance music. That B section was never there. It was just like, it was something complete. It was something much cleverer and much more. Yes, now this is going to show them. And then I realised that continuing down that was the first part, the rural part, as I'd call it, the bucolic part, actually needed to be contrasted against this very silly idea. And basically, and there was comedy in it, and I loved the fact there was comedy in it. I mean, the whole song is about sheep in Yorkshire, and it's basically about sheep observing the walkers. And so you've got the walkers, and so maybe in your case it would be going up to the Catskills, and you'd think the people who's going up to the Catskills, is it well, it's probably quite educated people who
people with means,
and also readers and educated, and we know how to live a good life, and so up in the Yorkshire Dales, it's there's geography teachers and all sorts of things, and the sheep are looking at these people and just saying, "You don't belong here. Look at you. You think you're dressed? Look at me. I'm, I can survive up here in the winter, in the snow, whatever. I'm fine. I'm made for this. You're not made for this. Look at your shoes." And so they're laughing. They're laughing at these people, and sort of thinking that, well, I'm a better person because I've embraced the elements and I own the elements, and the sheep are saying, "You don't own anything. You think you do. We own it." That's what the song's about. And so when it switches up, it's that Livy, my daughter, doing that very silly kind of posh rap, so to speak.
Obviously the album's not out yet, so I don't know if anybody else has relayed this to you in a similar way, but I'm obviously familiar with your work in the High Llamas specifically, and I put the album on this morning, and I put it on prior to actually reading the press release or anything else around it, and I had a moment where about 3 or 4 songs in, I thought that I listened to music on Apple Music, and I thought that it had shuffled to a different artist.
Wow.
It really, and it wasn't until I read that press release and realized what a big influence Jay Dilla had been that it started really making sense to me.
So over the last, 20 years, I was very admiring of so many artists, and Jay Dilla was obviously introduced to me through listening to, I don't know, Dr. Dre and Pharrell and people like that.
Every hip hop record for about a 10-year period, it seemed like.
Yeah, but they admired this guy, and he basically sort of introduced this idea of, first of all, of the sweet, just introducing a sweet spot of harmony, a sweet spot of observation, matching that with the idea of pushing beats off the grid, and it was just like what an incredible impact that had on so many people, I was quite, and that basically pushed me into listening to R&B, which then I didn't take it as seriously as I should. It was only after like my kids were like listening to stuff, and I'd just walk in the room and I'd say, "What is this? What is this? What is this?" And it would like, "Oh, Dad, this is Solange, Dad." Okay, wow. Well, this is incredible. Who's she collaborating with? Oh, a guy called John Carroll Kirby. Oh, what the hell? And what's this? And and I didn't even know who Tyler was. When I made Tullahomey Way, and then I was getting calls from people saying, this guy called Tyler, the creator, and he loves that song he wrote about Dorothy Ashby. And I went, wow, who is this guy? And it was only later then people coming in and saying, what the fuck? Don't you know who this guy is? And I said, no, I don't. And but because I was divorced from that so long, from the early 20s, the early noughties, I was listening to too many records by Basil Kershen, and then I just started saying, who is this? What is this? And then, wow, like the, then, people like Kaja Bonnet started making records, and I was No Name, and then that whole group of guys from Chicago, Shmino and Saber, and they call themselves Pivot, and it was just like, oh my god, there's that, and I realised that there was something very important happening, and what it was a generation of musicians had kind of gone beyond this strange place that I was when my cohorts were. We were very political in our music, and I don't mean large P politics. I mean small P politics. We were tribal, and I just felt that there were a group of people making music that said, I'm going to make this music, which over here it's kind of loose indie, and over here it's very much R&B, and it's over here it's Sly Stone, and over here it's I don't know, Felt or the Smiths, and but there's also very much part of my current of me in and there was I believe there were people making the right choices, and there were people owning they're owning the music business in a weird way right at the time when the music business was actually sort of falling apart, and it was becoming, nobody knew who owned it because the platforms were being set up, and but in a weird way, creatively they were owning it. When Steve Lacy said, I'm going to make a record on an iPhone, that's very much creatively owning the means and the ways. So yeah, that was incredible for me.
It's funny that you mentioned Sly Stone. I recently started reading his memoir. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that yet.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm from San Francisco originally, so he's a Bay Area guy. He's very, very, very important. And it's funny when you talk about this idea of having been really regimented in your approach to music, because this is very clear from his music, but it's even more clear hearing him talk, or I guess write about it, that at the time, it seemed like it was really important for them to not be regimented. That even back then, and that he came up through the 50s and the early 60s, and he was producing The Great Society. So he's talking about producing Grace Slick before she was, really, really Grace Slick. And it seems like in a lot of ways that a lot of these sort of arbitrary distinctions that we put on ourselves are entirely self-imposed, and a lot of them came in some ways perhaps after. I think a lot about this from the context of, I'm of an age that when I grew up and I was listening to, music, to punk specifically, this idea of selling out was very important. It was very important in the 90s.
That was your political moment. Yeah.
And it's gone now, and it's something that I think that doesn't even occur to younger artists.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of artifice in some of these arbitrary categories that we put ourselves into.
It's really interesting you say that because, so in your time, you would have had, I don't know, Fugazi and the Minutemen and whatever, that whole, and those guys actually literally had manifestos, didn't they?
Ian MacKaye was very...
Yeah. And so today, these kids, they are political because they're basically out, they're out talking about there's a lot of shit going on in the world, and they are referring to...
They don't have a choice. No. You can't not be. There's the way Howard Zinn put it is you can't be neutral on a moving train.
No, absolutely. But none of that is anything to do with Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do and where the beat falls, because, it could be Thundercat or Twigs or even Taylor Swift. And they are politically very, very. They're basically. It could be anybody. Yeah, it could be anybody. It could be Thundercat or Twigs. Am I freezing again? Am I good?
The video is. The audio's fine. I'm gonna turn off my video camera, and you could, if you want to turn yours off.
Yeah,
so we don't need the video.
No.
Then we'll probably. There we go.
Yeah,
okay.
It's better. Yeah, okay, that's better. You're definitely okay now. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's any of these people, whether it's Thundercat or Twigs or Taylor Swift. Huge difference between them, but they're basically they're on this politically. They talk about real politics, and I think the politics that we certainly as a kid we were making judgments about people because they weren't part of the tribe, so to speak. They're making musical decisions, which are their decisions, and owning their musical decisions. But politically, they're astute, and the politics is real. It's not pretend. It's absolutely real. It's so real that some idiot's going to drive a car into your friend and kill them.
In a lot of ways, though, you were very much pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I think in this specific instance, if you're talking about having this awakening almost through Odd Future, through Tyler, the Creator, that a lot of people your age or even younger, even people in their 40s, I think 30s would be hesitant to move so dramatically in such a contemporary direction.
Well, it was quite. I found it an affront, really, that people of my age or my cohort would literally not share any enthusiasm for exploring, and they would. And there's this ridiculous thing, and it's my generation, and they said, look, we went through punk. Yeah, we had punk, we had Prince, we had blah 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 blah. Everything else is just a new iteration of the great stuff that already happened. So there's no point listening to. How many times have you met people who have that attitude? It's all been said and done. So there's no point, and they're almost proud about it because I've got my grandkids. They love Hendrix, which proves the point. My grandkids listen to Hendrix, so it proves the point. It's almost embarrassing. It's almost embarrassing. And look, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be invited into a room with Archie King Cruel, and to do strings. It's just incredible. It's just wonderful. But I think
Will Oldham was a big part of this record, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah. What happened with Will and I we were talking to each other a little bit about gospel music. And we both decided that, why do we and our men go to clubs when they should be going to churches? Because that's where there's some really interesting music happening. And we said, we should try to write together. And obviously we go back a long way to the Palace, the Hope, because obviously, that record. So I just said, send over a set of lyrics, and I'll try to do something with a gospel push. Let's try to expand on this shared admiration we have, and and I'm telling you, when you get a lyric like The Hungriest Man, it's incredible. It's like getting a lyric from Johnny Cash or something. It's just amazing. And I really enjoyed that process of, because when you get a lyric, normally when you write a lyric, you have got some kind of geography of how the words will flow. There's the side of the mountain, there's the top of the mountain, and there's the other side, and you've got some kind of, and this stops and starts. But I was given these lyrics, and I was given the choice to just completely create that geography, that angulation, which I chose to do, driven by this kind of gospel-y piano, and then just basically just pumped in all of this contemporary stuff. And I tuned my voice, and I sent it to Wheeler Wilson. How come my voice isn't tuned? And I said, okay, I'll tune your voice. So he said, I've been waiting for somebody to do that for years.
We started the conversation by discussing, again, this this quote from the press release about having one more artistic record left in you, and whether or not this was that record. But to me, listening to you discuss this as we're winding up the conversation, you sound so excited about music right now that it seems like it would be silly to let that go to waste.
Yeah, but I can work with other people. I can be, and as I said before, when you're in that process, when you're in the room with somebody else and you're just finishing a job, you might do your best work in that situation, and I'm quite happy for that to be the case. I am excited. We were flicking through things. I came across this guy Baird the other day, Baird. It's just incredible, and it's just like this stuff is this track called something. Leave It on the Skin, or it's basically a track about falling off your bike, or falling off, just riding your bike in the neighborhood and falling a lot, and it's just skin on the ground. It's incredible, and I just thought no other generation could make that tune. It's this generation that can make that tune. And the other thing I say to my cohorts is, stop talking about, was it the late 70s, the early 70s, or was it late 60s? Stop talking about that, because it just might be, the golden age just might be now. And if you keep talking about what went before, you might miss the golden age. Yeah, I really believe that.